Huh?
I talked to
Just
Malin.
right across the street.
Oh,
from
yes.
She's alive.
our
Sunday?
cemetery.
No?
Oh, the third.
Yeah, okay.
I can't make it, but the two of you should get together.
Okay.
But I sent then a text to the two of you. And
Yeah.
you responded, so.
Oh, no, well, anyway, it's been a crazy day.
Yeah, he said her phone was acting up.
Oh,
She said somehow she got connected, and she had 100 texts that came
okay, we have everybody here, so we're gonna go ahead and get started for the town board work session for Monday, October 28th. We've got some budget presentations, and then we'll talk about future meetings agenda. Goal of the work session is to have the town board receive information on topics. And this is all specifically related to budget. So with that, our first one this evening is police. So,
Yes, and just so you know, you
Chief
do
here.
not need to check your page numbers. I'll cover everything you need to know. No? Okay.
Start something.
There's only like, just 11 slides. We'll make it really quick. First thing up is here is our current org chart and assignments going up. I apologize for the graininess of it. It was a PDF I couldn't get copied into the slideshow at all. Just basically shows how the officers are divided up into teams, and some of the assignments are handed out to those people. So you'll see up here we have these are the vacancies we currently have. This is Officer R. White. He's in training, so he technically doesn't count as an officer at this point. He is just a trainee, so he is accounted for with his training officer when he's working.
Where will he go, chief, when he's?
It depends on what side of the early weeks or late weeks needs his bolstering. So it depends on where we're at with staff. We have one officer's out still out on leave, extended leave, so she'll be out probably till February, maybe later.
Okay.
And so it depends on where the spot's at. So we're also working through some possible staffing changes as far as promotions and things and changing assignments. So that will all play into where people go as we move forward. So our current staff, we have 8 non-sworn. That's our front desk people, our CSOs, our evidence tech that fill those positions. So we have 8 sworn, but one of those positions is vacant at this time. That's the one CSO position. 41 sworn officers, 6 crossing guards with 3 crossing backup. If you can find a way for us to give this back to the school district or somebody else to do it, I'll buy you dinner for a year. This has been it's a very difficult thing for us to staff, and it's hard to find people who want to do it. 2 hours a day, it pays well. I mean, they make $22 a shift, so they make $44 a day, which is not bad, but you're tied down to being here in the morning and in the afternoon, so becomes a little.
Was there some agreement we struck that said you would back up?
I can't give you the history of it. I know Tom may have it even more than I. When I started, we had one crossing guard, and that was Brenda Smith, and she was our code enforcement. She was doing crossing at 9th and Main for the school there before we got the light put in, and it just kind of evolved from there. There's many districts that towns and communities that do not provide crossing guards, and there are also those that do provide it. The school does provide some crossing guards to some of the schools. They're off streets, like Skyview has a crossing guard there off of Pine. Tozer has some of the staff that crosses people at off of Oak Street, and then Mountain View has a crossing guard by the library.
So, and I did already meet with the superintendent to discuss this a little bit, just because it's been a common refrain from the PD. And for the town, it's not even really the cost of the program, it's just logistically, this is a hard position to fill, and when we don't have a crossing guard show up, we're backfilling that with patrol officer,
Right.
and that's a hard position to fill, especially if we have. So we talked to Dan, the history has been, it's been on the busier streets, so that's why we have them on like 15th and Main Street, and we don't have them on the side roads. And so we did discuss the fact that the town has put in RFPs, you know, in front of the high school and in front of 15th to kind of help mitigate that. And I just said, you know, geez, it'd be nice if we could work together and figure out how to turn this over to the school district. Even if the town helps fund that, you know, to just kind of get it logistically off of our plate, I think would be a nice big step. So we
Yeah.
started that, and, you know, I'm glad Chief is wanting to buy me dinner every day for a year because I'm
I did say what McDonald's would get. Top of them.
I'm hungry, so but anyway, that's, I think, the kind of history of why we do it where we do it, has just been on the really busy streets.
Yeah.
But whether that person is, you know, I think we still need the guard even with our RFBs, but whether that's a town employee or a school district employee,
Yeah.
I think can be debated.
Well, I think that's a good conversation to start, and I think maybe as the district meetings, you know, start happening quarterly, because we're not gonna find a different solution if we don't just put it out there and say, look, if the last year the town is to provide and do this for you ends in 2020, let's just say we put it like that. I mean, kind of like when we were told our place was gonna be up, we had to get creative and we found a space. I think more conversation would be had to figure out maybe a better solution.
I agree. It's a growing concern, and it never fails. There's always neighborhoods that want more crossing. We've had requests for crossing guards on 7th Street to get them from your side of town over to the Skyview schools. And so it's never a dull moment. And there's been several times this school year already where we've had to backfill with patrol officers, not just CSOs, to fill that. And there were several cases where we did not have officers available because they were on call, so it went uncontrolled. So
What's that line item cost though? What's the crossing guards?
I think it's right
The
around.
school district reimburse some of it, don't they? Don't we have?
No.
None of it?
No.
Why I thought we got it.
The crossing guard, the budget, it's about 39,000 a year,
Yeah.
a little over that. And so,
I don't think it's about the money, though. I think it's about the logistics and how it's tying up our valuable time when obviously, you know, our folks need to, I think, be focused in other places. And I think a different solution, while there's still maybe a need, would be better suited
Yeah.
someplace else.
We've looked at several different options and avenues. I mean, in some jurisdictions, they actually have some seniors that do it, but we've tried that several times, and there's no interest from that group to take this on, so I don't necessarily blame them. So,
Maybe we condition our support of the Optimist group with them providing. Oh,
Were you done?
Chief, are these school?
He said seniors can also
Yeah,
volunteer, so I'm sure
Somebody give a birthday.
town board's not excluded from
Have a
that.
birthday, right?
I do, I'm senior. School resource officers up there? Are they in
No,
there?
yeah, say they're included in the 41 sworn.
Sworn.
The 41 sworn includes command staff, investigators, SROs, and just patrol officers, so it covers all sworn staff.
So we do still share that cost.
The SRO is shared at 50/50. So, yeah. And we also have 2 volunteers that have been volunteering with us for every year. Cindy Honey is one of them that works for us, comes in and does filing and stuff several times a week. So that works well there. So.
On the crossing guards,
Yes, sir.
I don't know the school budgets, but perhaps one solution could be, because the issue is 2 hours in the morning, 2 hours in the afternoon, it's really awkward. If there was a way to combine that with another position that maybe they're looking at within their building, a teacher's aide or something.
Yes, and on that point, I don't want to belabor it, but
Right.
we have gone to the schools and said, listen, we will pay the crossing guard, the aides to do
That
that
part
time.
of
One of the problems, there's two problems there. They don't have enough aides to fill the
That's
aide
the other
positions they
thing.
currently have
Right.
available. And 2, if they are on the school district's payroll for that, then it affects their hours when they get, the mandatory hours before they go for benefits. So if we were able to pay them,
Yeah.
that wouldn't apply to their,
It had to work out the right person,
And
2
so-
part-time jobs combined.
so,
Yeah.
it's changed, right, there's a lot of working parts, and we need to work with that going forward. So, yeah, 2 volunteers. our additions next year is we're gonna, we intend to promote 2 officers to sergeants. That will provide us 24-hour supervision, the midnight guys. In theory, there's always times when there's a sergeant or somebody's gone that they're without supervisor, so we'll continue on with our acting supervisor program that puts somebody in charge, even if there's sergeants at school on vacation, ill. We're gonna promote 1 sergeant to commander, and I say commander, we are changing the title from lieutenants to commanders. It's not a monetary change in their salary, it just aligns them more in line with what other agencies in the area do as far as duties and responsibilities. So it makes that more smooth in the transition. We are intending to hire 2 patrol officers. One of those positions was authorized as an overhire this year. We got that person hired, that would be Joseph Arnold Smith, White. We don't call him Smith, as without his White. But as soon as we got him hired, we lost an officer, so we're back in the same position, and we're doing interviews here in the next couple weeks, hopefully to fill that position. But there are two positions coming out of the 2020 budget. Contract service is one of the larger line items. If you look at it, took a huge jump, and it did take a huge jump. For several reasons. One, the biggest one is that you're looking at is Well County Communications, the dispatch center, increased their cost by $38,000. And they will increase that cost at least 2 more times in that place. They say they won't do it after that, but there's no guarantee. That was the same statement I was advised of when I first took over, that they were going to raise it 2 more times to be done. Well, they've changed that story too, so they're raising it again. LEDA, 911, Laramie County Emergency, has increased their cost to almost $6,000. In addition, what they used to, last year they charged us $1,000, it went up to $6,876, so an increase there. And we're also, items are added this year that we don't have any control over, is a guard terminal. I mentioned this before in some of my updates, the victim advocates. SOTAR is our sex offender registration software that is provided by a county down south. They built a model to do it, and they monitor and they update it, so they go through that process. And there is also an intended staffing study, a one-time staffing study to be done next year. Coming from the board every year and say we need officers, we need this. I talked to Shane that really like to have an outside source look at that and say, listen, you're adequately staffed. You need to look at this. You need to and give us a kind of a ballpark idea of if we're on track and what we're doing is right. And so, because as you can see, the cost of an officer, it's not an inexpensive endeavor.
Chief, before you go.
Yes, sir.
Does LEDA essentially serve the same function as Will County Communications? Is it dispatch?
That's code red. In Will County is code red. So we use LEDA. They do our polygons and stuff like emergencies, we have notifications stuff. We go to them.
But that Will County Communications there, that's not code red.
No.
That's your dispatch.
Yeah. So they handle all the dispatching, and most of that money, they get all the 911 funds that come in off your phone and stuff that goes to them. But that is used for the infrastructure that they're building throughout the county. So we pay for primarily this is just helping to pay for staff, dispatchers and stuff in the office to handle calls for us.
I think you talked about it before, but if you guys are responding west and they cross the county line, do you need to switch over?
No, we still use Will County Dispatch as our dispatcher. What took place this year is LEDA took back their 911 calls. So now a 911 call will go into Will County or to Laramie County, and then we'll route it back to our Will County dispatcher, who gets it to us. So we were told it would be seamless, there wouldn't be any delays. We continue to monitor that to make sure there isn't any slip-ups there, because one of the concerns is that someone at the hockey rink calls in a emergency and the call gets routed and doesn't get to us in a timely manner. So we've had no issues with that at all. So it's been relatively not an issue.
On the LEDA increase of 5,800,
Mhm.
to what number? Do you know, do you happen to have the total?
It's 6,000. It was 1,000 last year, now it went up to six, just add 1,500, so it's $6,876.
From 1,000 to 6?
Part of the issue with it is because of the state funding, if you talk to Kim from LEDA, is that they're trying to recoup their costs, and the phone companies, that it's going skyrocketing, so they're looking any way they can to recoup their costs.
Like we do with the fire district, do you get an end-of-year study or show of like how many calls go
Yes.
through?
Yes, I can
What
get
the response time is, or
We don't,
anything
we have
like that?
response on it, but it's slightly different, Mayor. Because we're using eForce is our RMS system, so that's where we're getting most of our data comes from when we input that. So we do have stuff that comes from Will County, but it's not tracked. We don't track it. They don't track it in the same manner because we're not
Okay.
part of their RMS system. So they provide us a service, but it's not the full service. We do get a list of all the calls. We can get a breakdown of type 1 calls down to type 5 calls. But we do have that comes up, and we're, I think, the third largest user of the system, or third or fourth largest user of the system, so.
So you get to see everybody else's reports
And
as well?
yes, I do. If you look at the weekly updates, or not weekly updates, I'm sorry, when it comes out of the monthly, and it tells you, there's normally a number at the top there says, 1,900, 1,500, 1,700. That's the number of calls that are generated that month,
Okay.
and so it adds up over the year. Some of these are capital items that actually we've gone through before. I just wanted to highlight them. We're getting a Connex for a range. We're going to be moving using a range down in Johnstown. So we'll need a place to secure our equipment. And some of that is range safety equipment that will be needed for that. It's lane markers. It's some of the other items that the range instructors need for safety equipment. This is some of the other equipment. The big one here, and it is a big one, is the rifle program. The tactics and stuff, what we're doing with emergency response, active shooters, active engagement. There's a need for a weapon that is not a defensive weapon, it's an offensive weapon, and it's intended for officers to use in that manner. So a pistol is a close quarter tool. A shotgun has rifles provide you a much more accurate and precise tool when you need it, and it's something that we've been lacking for a long time. It's just trying to go through it. The other is radio earpieces.
So every officer will be equipped now not only with a pistol, but
Yeah.
a shotgun as well?
A rifle.
A rifle.
Yeah. Not every officer. You're not going to see me with a rifle.
Okay.
And probably maybe some of the other commanders, and only for the standpoint when something that nature happens, we'll be the ones as the active command, and so we're not going to be basically the operators forced into it. Yes, if there's a situation at the school and I'm the only one there, then I would be the one responding in.
Okay.
So, but
Is this a training program or equipment or both?
it's equipment. It's equipment. The training we've done in-house, we have rifle instructors in-house. They can do the training, so we'll do the majority of that in-house. The earpieces, those are, I'm sure you've seen officers when the radio, they have looks like a Secret Service earpiece in, and that is just that. It's a safety equipment that is used for when they're searching buildings in loud, noisy areas. This allows them to stay in contact with dispatch and to hear what's taking place. Gas mask, something we haven't had ever, but probably really need. It's not for typically the right situations, not what it's for. It is really intended for biological exposures. One of the more insidious ways of people committing suicide is to use a chemical exposure. Most people that do that are kind enough to leave a note saying, "Do not enter." But it is for that purpose. It's a safety tool. The last one is the MK9 foggers. It's basically a large can of pepper spray. If you recall, last year we had the officer that dealt with the guy with the knife at the loaf and jug. A tool like this would have stopped it, if you just put the wand on the door, released the pepper spray, and got him to leave.
So the canine has nothing to do with the dog?
No.
Good. I was afraid you were gonna fog me with hunting.
Excuse me. Apologize. We're also going to intend to do some remodel work at the PD. Our current island in the patrol area, if you've been in there, it's a large desk, probably larger than this table. We're going to cut that down, add some workspace in there, and then remodel the admin area where Susanna and Carol and Deb are currently working, and add some space in there, in that area there. So. This is the big gorilla on the room. I blame Corinne. No. The transfers from other departments to my budget, you're looking at, that's a sizable increase, but you're looking at cop tracks, security cameras, Lumen. Now Lumen, this is Lumen eForce. What that is, we have an investigative tool that allows us to link with other databases in the state. To do that, we have to convert our eForce data, which is our RMS system, over to Lumen, and it requires them to write a program to do that. The cost is right at $24,000. If we can get 2 other agents to join us, which we were working on a few months ago, it would drop it down a little over $6,000. So
Chief, the things you've listed there are the additional things in 2020 that caused the...
Corinne, I defer you in that regard, but I think some of these are, these are additions. That's an addition there. This is an addition. These are, I don't know, if these are new or replacements, Corinne, do you recall?
It's for the sergeants
Okay.
to have their patrol
Yeah.
cars.
Yeah, in the patrol cars, it's there. Then this is Lumen, and of course, security camera. This is the updating of our security cameras in the building. They're
Yes,
falling apart, Corinne?
yes.
Yeah. You think it's not that old a building, but technology is so quickly obsolete, so. And then this is the fleet transfer. We'll be going to one-to-one car assignments, so we can hopefully reduce some of the parking at the site, and for quicker responses for officers. Facilities, this really is probably is more for personnel, just people time in the building to take care of stuff. And of course, the loan, it's the same every year. It doesn't change, so.
What's remaining on that loan, Dean?
I just looked at that the other day. I'm gonna say about 3-point-something million. We made a double payment on that last year, at the end of last year.
So we did, yeah.
I guess just on the IT transfers, I mean, it looked like 250,000 anyway.
There's less, other stuff in trend, yeah. Their normal trend, and other increases, new bodies.
Okay, so it's really, are you allocated specifically on particular tasks, or is IT really looking at each department and saying,
It's just dividing up what it's costing us, and it's pushing it out more to, this is being used in the PD, Public Works is using this, so
Yeah.
their resources is just pushing it out. And some of, like I said, are increases. The Lumen, it's a one-time cost. We won't have that every year. It's just a one-time, we need to do that data transfer.
Most of those costs were one-time costs?
Some of them will be recurring. Go back. Oops, sorry.
The other way.
Cop tracks, this is very much a one-time cost for this project here, but as these are the in-car cameras, and so they will be on a replacement cycle. They'll have to go through. These are Cop Tracks 1s, we go into Cop Tracks 2. When we originally purchased the Cop Tracks 1, we did not realize, or the people reported didn't realize that those when you shut the car off, it shuts the car. It doesn't work. So it becomes it's not as effective or efficient, so we're going to cop tracks too, which are much more efficient and will work properly. So, security cameras, that's pretty much a one-time, but there will be a recurring cost at some time in the future when that needs to be changed. The inventory software, that is a one-time cost, but I think, Corinne, isn't there a yearly maintenance cost? But it won't be that much. And of course, these licenses, eForce licenses, they are depend on how many officers we have, or people using the system, so we have to purchase those. I think we can purchase them by, I think at least 5 or 10 to give a slight discount. Yes?
Do we have a SWAT unit or something comparable?
We do not have a SWAT. We have a warrant service team. And so when a warrant, they are, they wear the ballistic helmet, which is all the officers recently got from the Shield 616, and a protective vest. But we use those in high-risk warrants situations. We have what we call a warrant matrix, an arrest matrix. So if we're going to arrest a person who has a warrant, we take their data and stuff and put it in this matrix, and we score it. And if they score at a certain level, it goes to a SWAT team, and then we would call it a Weld County SWAT team, or Laramie County if it's Laramie County. But so we have a matrix, we work on that. At some point in time, the department probably will have a tactical team, but at this point, no. The warrant service team is the closest thing they have. They have some tactical training, but it is intended just basically to make a safe arrest, it's a higher risk than a traffic citation warrant. But so we've used them a few times this year.
The numbers there in the IT transfer come up to about 130,000, but the difference between 2019 and 2020 is about 230,000. Is it really that much?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, over 200 some odd $1,000 difference in that?
And I think that's including just.
So this has come up, I think, a few other times when we discussed the budget. So the IT budget, which will be presented in a few minutes, you guys can see where that's going. But really, we've just changed internally how we're charging different departments. So we used to bill back basically on ticket calls, how many times you called IT in. Now we're going based on the computers you have, the software you have. So it's just looking at the impact of each department on IT a little bit differently. So that's the difference there. So again, like the PD, they have, all the cars have computers in them, they
Phones.
Phones, yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of items, and a lot of, I can probably attest to, there's a lot of software costs and licensing costs to go with it. Everything, they write it, they want to be paid for it, and I don't blame them, but it does add up. And I'm glad they're going to this rather than the ticket, because I have such IT karma that I'm on the phone with them every day, so it'd probably be a lot more than if they didn't do that.
This is saving you money.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's just, again, it doesn't really change, it's just an internal transfer. So in some departments, if you look, the number's gone down, others have gone up. I think Chiefs is one that was the most dramatic as far as going up. But when you look at the way the PD uses IT and all their equipment and phones and everything else, it's just how the numbers kind of rolled out.
Yeah, we do have a lot of technology needs, and ironically, when I started, we didn't have any computers at all, and now we've gone from keeping our daily TDRs in a notebook on the desk to some of this high-speed stuff, so it's big changes.
Chief, to Dr. Jones' question on that rifle program, this isn't a sniper sort of?
No, it's not a sniper. There will be no snipers. This is a tactical response weapon, so it's a precision tool that you use to engage suspects or potential suspects. And so if you were doing like an active shooter response, it's intended, there was several incidents, been in the news lately where officers responding neutralize the threats, and they were using rifles. And it's the standard in law enforcement at this point. So you'll see most cars, most agencies out there will have, they're equipped with a shotgun and a rifle in the car.
Like 223 or something?
It'd be a 223 or 5.56. Yes.
Yeah, more accurate.
Mm-hmm. And the ballistics, at one time we were part of the 1033 program, which is the government, you get items from the government, and we had some 308 rifles. great rifle, and great, I'd love to have one of my personally, but they're not very effective for entering a building. The round is too hot and goes through walls, and I think where the ones we'd be looking at would be safe to use, safe as you possibly be to use in those environments.
Are the rifles almost out of age at this point then? I mean, not the rifles, the shotguns.
No, they're still very
There's still a
effective.
use?
Oh, yes.
There's
yes,
a need
yes,
for them?
yes. And some of it's psychological, some of it is precision and tactical, but yes, there's still a definite need for a shotgun.
Okay, anything else for our chief?
Ask now or I'm getting pizza.
Okay, okay, go get pizza. It's time for administrative services next. Who's doing administrative
Jess.
services?
Me.
Ah, just me.
Hello. All right, so administrative services. Here we are. We are a new department as of beginning of this year. As you can see, there's about 5 divisions underneath us that have come underneath this umbrella. The town clerk, customer service, human resources, communications, and IT. You can also see there's some subdivisions like court, utility billing, and risk management. All my managers are here in the back too if we have some specific questions. Admin services' real purpose is that the blend of internal and external support, whether it be through customer service up front, through utility billing, court, general questions, or that internal support that we have with communications, HR, and IT. Okay?
Are these just all the functions that'll be moving together as a group, or?
Just HR and IT are moving out into that area. So.
Starts on page 2.
All right, so we're going to start with the town clerk and customer service. Again, that is on page 2. You'll see, just for note, that the payroll budget does include the admin services director's salary, not only for this year, but moving forward. So that is a big change, if you see that. There are no personnel or reclassification requests in these 2 divisions. And just a note, there is an increase on the elections line, and this is to repair the voting machines so they're proper working order for the 2020 election. Questions?
Were they broken when the 2018 election was there?
Saw some people want.
Ixnay.
All right, moving on to HR, this will be on page 5. This division does have a request in addition for a reclassification and new position. In all of the additions and requests, this is based on the need and the increased demand. The town has grown, not only outwardly, but also inwardly with our departments and their support that is needed. In HR, we have not grown for quite a few years with the organization. And we've taken a hard look at our HR specialist and what she does, and would like to reclass her to the HR generalist, which is a move up and reflects exactly what she's doing. And then have a new position for the HR technician, which takes away some of the extra stuff she's doing now and supports the department, supports our organization as well. Note, any of these staffing changes in addition, the total numbers include benefits, payroll, taxes, and equipment. And those are the same numbers and same information you saw when we did our first presentation on October 7th. To highlight some other changes under operations and maintenance, in the employee development training line, there is a $5,000 increase. This line takes care of our Windsor Academy. This is an internal training program that we provide for all employees. We have several different tracks, whether it be technology, leadership development, management help, that kind of stuff. We are very good about trying to collaborate with other organizations, specifically Larimer County, to maximize the dollars that we use for good presentations. We've done that twice this year, and we hope to do that again next year. The increase is just based on the number of employees we are adding and adding a little bit more opportunity for everyone. Under contract services, there's about a $9,400 increase. This is for the new hire background and drug tests as we have more people. And then the annual Gallup contract, we did the engagement survey with Gallup, and there is an annual fee for that, and that's about $6,700 of that $9,400. And then last is the
We
study.
have an annual contract with Gallup?
For 3 years. So each year we'll do,
Oh, that's an internal study.
yeah, the employee engagement
Gotcha,
survey.
okay.
And that helps us work on our culture and improve. On the last one is the study and review or / consultant. You'll see an increase of about 13,500. Now this is setting the stage, and I'm gonna kind of go back for the 2021 budget. We'll be doing a full-time, part-time employee and a police step plan study. So pay studies for full-time and part-time, and then the police step plan in anticipation for 2021. Questions?
On the police step plan, I read someplace where the program that the police are under, I'm not going to remember the acronym.
Yeah, FPP.
The state,
Yeah.
that was increasing.
Well, no, there's a bill that was kind of floated last year and went away, and it's back, and it's basically a proposal that would increase the employer match to that. And the opposition is that it's really because the retirees haven't received an increase in a while. And so even though it's a fully funded plan, they want to guarantee retirement. And so that has been opposed by CML. There's a couple other provisions in it. I think one is, one is for people who've been injured in line of work. Oh, no, another one is for an early retirement at 50 if you meet certain criteria. And then the third one is for people who've received a disability. And so CML has supported the disability one. It's a pretty small increase, and the other two CML is opposing. So you may know.
So it increased benefits in a way, but the funding of that would come from increased employer.
Yeah, that's right.
But we're not reflecting that in the budget.
Well, we're not, because it
not
hasn't
passed.
passed, it hasn't gone anywhere. And if it does, you guys would know, yeah, it usually staggers in. So, we are gonna, be pretty active on that, because that is one of the few bills that really could impact the town. So, we'll stay actively engaged with CML and possibly call our legislators if we think that's the right next step, or send some letters based on the fiscal impact.
Did we kind of do it back of the envelope and say if it did pass, what would be the impact?
We've talked a little bit with finance. I don't know if they've actually run the numbers. I mean, we're aware of it. We're just, it's not anything yet. I don't even think that there's, a bill's actually been introduced yet this year. I think we're just anticipating one. But once we do, I think that our guys could run that in, we could have that in a couple hours.
It would probably not be implemented in 2020.
Yeah, I don't know the
It would
timing.
be surprising if it was.
Again, I guess some of the history is, a few years ago, both the employer and the employees contributed 8%.
Right.
The employees opted to go up to maybe 10%, but the employers did not, and they said, we're gonna voluntarily kick in more to this plan. But because of a lot of actuarial things and other things happening, that people that have retired haven't received a raise for a few years. And so, to me, to increase this amount, and even though it's a fully funded plan for retiree pensions, doesn't really seem like the right way for the legislature to come after our budget, so.
Yeah.
Seems like
I guess if the bill's introduced, and it sounds like it can be, it'd be interesting to know what you think the impact would be if it passed. 100,000, $500,000, I have no idea what.
Yeah, again,
We'll see.
if a bill's introduced, we'll definitely run that analysis. But I can tell you, generally statewide, it's gonna be probably pretty heavily opposed by CML and a lot of other organizations.
So I have a
Sorry.
couple questions related to this in the actual budget.
Which, on HRs, which page are you?
On the general fund expenditures, temporary customer service, the wages. So the 2020 budget of wages at the almost $505,000, does that take into account all of these?
That's not in, the town clerk and customer service don't have any increases in staff.
Okay, so where,
Page 5,
okay.
we'll show you HRs. The only one that would reflect would be the addition of my salary.
So to answer your question, under HR expenditures, wages full-time, that does include the.
But so where are these two items here? These two
So
items are gonna be
that's on
reflected here
Page
under
A5.
HR somewhere?
Yeah, the first line, wages full-time.
Uh-huh.
If you look under 2020, that 285, And you can see the note next to that, Director of HR, HR, social, so they're reflected in there, the reclassification and the request.
Okay. Well, and back to, I guess, you're gonna talk about clerk, but that's the page I guess I was on because I was directed there. What's the seasonal at 9? What do we have seasonal help in there for? Is that for,
That's our COE.
Summer.
okay. Okay. And they're gonna be working twice as long, or we have to pay them twice as much moving forward?
The way that works is we actually had somebody year-round this time, and we get them in the fall. And so they actually go through 2 budget years.
Okay.
Anything else? Alright, moving on. Communications will be page 6. On this one, you'll see 2 staffing changes. First is the reclassification of our part-time visual media specialist. That would be Mackenzie, the gentleman that runs the station, who's behind the camera. He does a lot of our video production as well, and helps out when he can in other areas. The reclassification will move him from 3/4 time to a full-time position. And that bulk of that cost would be the benefits, because right now we don't pay any benefits. He's not a benefit position. So that 40,000 is definitely benefits. And the other position is a new position we're asking for is a communications coordinator. So currently, the communications department is made of the IT manager, a communications coordinator, or part-time visual media specialist, and an intern. The current communications coordinator is dedicated solely to Parks, Rec, and Culture. And so the rest of the type of communications like infrastructure, transportation, PD, and everything fall on the intern, what the other coordinator can pick up, and our IT manager. And knowing that those are our priorities here in the town, we need to make sure that we're communicating as well. And the only other thing to note on operations and maintenance is an increase on our public relations line. This is a lesson learned. Sometimes some things come unplanned. Like we move a recycling center and we need to promote more, advertise more, have different mailers and marketing, and those things come up from time to time, or we just need to add a little bit more to these town-wide programs or events.
I have a question. Where is the town newsletter? Is that under operations and maintenance?
It is.
Our newsletter?
Yeah, our
Newsletter
newsletter.
matters?
Right.
I think that
Where-
comes out of the town, our budget,
Does that come
the
over?
town board
Let me
budget.
double check.
Okay.
Yeah, it doesn't come out
Does
of
that
the
come out?
communications
Okay.
budget.
Is that correct, Kim?
It is.
Okay, that's under town. Okay, I'll send the question in.
Just to the extent, we saw the IT chargebacks, and it's not a small number, and depending on the department. Do all of the administrative functions charge back?
No, just IT. In terms of like similar to what IT does, so you're asking if communication charges back, or?
We had one that was dedicated to Parks and Rec. I just want to make sure that's reflected in certain budgets. Because it would make, if you had someone, in fact, that was really almost dedicated to a department.
In terms of work,
So-
managed by communications, we try to keep it. They also help us to, on other sides when we have
Okay?
the need for help for other townwide.
And for the communication specifically, one employee out of comms is paid for by Parks and Rec.
Okay,
She's
so there is a
basically,
split.
you'll recall last year, we really went through and tried to go kind of person by person and say, okay, are they really paid 100% by the general fund? How are they doing the work? And as part of that exercise, we saw that we had an employee in communications that was almost completely dedicated to Parks, and that wasn't reflected, so that has been changed.
So that entire salary is in the Parks and Rec budget?
Well, it's being, I think it's kind of an interfund transfer at the end of the year. So it's reflected, here's what you see here is the entire budget. But we do a lot of kind of accounting at the end of the year, interfund transfers, and make sure all the funds pay back each other.
But ideally, by the end of the year, Parks and Rec compensates that entire position?
That's right, that's right. And it's a percentage of the rec center and a percentage of just kind of however we put the sausage together.
Anything else? All right, so the next is IT, and this will be on page 57, way in the back. So this first slide, we're just talking about the request for changes and additions. We're asking for 5 reclassifications. Currently, the IT division is very linear. We have our IT manager and 9 positions that report directly to our IT manager. Looking at the work done and the need to structure for efficiencies, we are proposing these and looking for these 5 reclassifications to bring it to be less linear and also to compartmentalize some of the work that they're doing. It'll meet the needs of the organization better. And you can see here, we're looking to take our network administrator to the IT supervisor, GIS coordinator to GIS supervisor, GIS technician to an analyst, and then an IT analyst to a business analyst, and an IT analyst to a system administrator. And all those, again, reflect salary and benefits, payroll, taxes, and equipment. And then looking at their operations and maintenance, the highlights on large increases. If you take a look at staff development, you'll see an increase of about $26,570. I'd like to take you a step back. So for the 2019 budget, you had approved an IT analyst and a security analyst position for IT. We went out to hire and struggled, sincerely struggled to find a security analyst. In fact, they actually have negative unemployment, so it's in high demand. It's a serious thing, and we do need to have some sort of protection. So we regrouped and asked to take and move that down from a security analyst to an IT analyst, because there's a need for that work, and take the difference and apply that to staff development across the board in the IT division. It is important and imperative that security is their first and foremost priority, and there is training that needs to be done to make that happen.
Jess,
Yes, sir.
regarding security,
Mhm.
as quickly as the whole world changes with that, does it make sense, is there opportunities to contract service?
And we do in some cases, and I'll let Corinne speak to that.
Okay.
And this year, for instance, we've had a cybersecurity assessment done.
Okay,
To
by an
have-
outside.
An outside
Right,
agency came in to help us understand what gaps we still have. So we have the assessment results from that, and we're working towards implementing the highest risk areas as soon as we can. And then moving forward, having a plan going forward with that. We have looked into contracted services, and they're very expensive.
I would think so.
So we had looked into doing some kind of protection where they come in and they put an appliance in our network to help us with that. That service would cost us over $50,000 a year, and that's just one piece of it. So if we contracted all that out, it would come to a pretty high dollar value. So
What
we're
I'm
trying
wondering
to
is
weigh that.
if any one person can keep up with the volume of hackers and changes, and, it seems like every time there's a new system, somebody else has figured out some way to break into it. So I mean,
Sure,
for one
sure,
person to
some-
keep up with all that seems kind of overwhelming.
It is, and it's a challenge that we're all
Yeah.
facing.
So we're probably okay right now.
It's a lot of discussion going on between
Yeah.
the municipalities and talking about different ways that we can combat this.
Yeah.
This is the thought of IT in general, all of the employees being engaged is a common
Okay.
thread across all the municipalities and government in general. They really believe that all IT staff need to have security training and need to have at least that very general knowledge, so that we can work as a team and do it smarter than just hiring in that one expert.
Okay.
It just helps for the future, that we're all engaged and that we're talking. We're starting to strike up conversations with other municipalities as well about, hey, we're seeing this, and trying to get that conversation going, because that's another mistake that we've made in the past as well, is that we're not talking enough.
Thank you.
And then we're also seeing, like, we know that the biggest vulnerability in any organization is your employees. People clicking on the email, getting spoofed, et cetera. So, Corinne's done a good job of, we basically run phishing scams internally, just trying to see if we can get employees to bite. So we're,
Not files, but we do.
I mean, we couldn't do that, so we really are, I think, a big part of it. I mean, I think,
We might have.
I think any organization is vulnerable.
Yeah.
And so we're, I think, trying to be proactive, but I don't know if we can build a big enough wall around. You just see
Yeah.
the, you know, the bad guys seem to be 10 steps ahead of the good
Yeah,
guys
that's
as far as figuring this stuff out. But I think that it will go a long way to just make sure all of our IT staff is at least a minimum level of security training.
And this is for a rolling plan, so we'll do a group this year and then a group next year, so they're always rolling through, and not all in one giant chunk.
I mean, to Mr. Bennett's point, I think that in the long run, I think absolutely everyone trained and everyone aware is never gonna hurt. But at some point, you're gonna realize someone has to be dedicated to that function as we grow. So it's probably a few years away, hopefully.
That's kind of the thought that we're having too, and this is something Jess and I have talked about frequently, but as we go through this and we do the training, that might just naturally start to occur.
Yeah.
So I would think within the team, somebody is gonna start to latch on to that and become kind of that expert in a sense, so that's our hope.
Meanwhile, if any board member gets an email from you saying, hey, click here for your special award, don't
Maybe
do
don't
it.
click.
Don't.
Okay, anything else? We got 3 other departments we have to get through in half an hour here.
Just, I don't know if you mentioned this, just, but the travel mileage went from $500 to $9,000.
Under IT.
That's beyond.
Yeah, so that's all part of the travel and training for IT, so this is part of their security and their Cisco training. So we're making a lot more concerted effort to send our IT staff to training. And it's been, I think some pennies we've pinched in the past that were probably not in the best interest of the organization. So, and if, believe me or not, that's about 50% of what they originally hit me with. So I held them at the gates. And
Do you want me to go over the last two? Do you want me to go over the last two?
Yeah, what's the photography?
That is our aerial photography for GIS. It's a one-time moment. So that'll be under the contract and hosting services, so that is the slight increase there. It looks like there's some savings as well that we made, because the photography is 40,000, the increase is 30. So.
They don't do that every year, renew the...
yeah, this is where they go through and they basically do aerial photographs, high def digital photographs, and they do it in different grids, and then we have to just purchase our area, and they just charge per grid, right? So that's about, what, every 3 years?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then the last one is the software maintenance contract line. This is the ongoing maintenance and licenses for new software and applications. So Chief talked about his inventory that they purchased. This will then reflect any of the ongoing maintenance, annual maintenance and licenses. Other examples will be like Invisio, our strategic planning software, will have ongoing maintenance and licensing. PipeLogix, which is our sewer camera software. The onboarding module for NeoGov, which HR uses, some changes in Laserfish, and then SeeClick Fix, and that is replacing YourGov on our website with Cartograph.
So these are all new software programs we're gonna.
So there's a line for the new software programs, we purchased them like last year, or for this year, and now they roll into this maintenance, and that is the cost of having new software. Thank you.
Okay, Stacy, economic development.
She can click it quick.
What?
You can click it quick.
Click, 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 is that what you said?
Click fix.
We'll tell you if we don't approve.
If you turn.
Okay. Looks good.
Yeah, it looks good so far.
All right, oops. Okay, I don't like that thing we're doing. All right. So, obviously, the areas of focus that economic development still deals with is on the strategic plan is the small town feel. Downtown, we've been able to attract, under downtown is just unique restaurants, and we've been able to work with Fuzzy's, Burger King, Doug's Diner, Wendy's, Dickey's Barbecue, the Colorado Cherry Company. Some of my other areas that I was responsible for helping to work with was to get involved with the mill and to complete that project. And we now have 3 restaurants in there. We still have about 4,000 square feet of office space that I'm working on to help fill in partnership with the DDA. And of course, the citizen survey always recommends the retail revenue and job creation. So we still work on projects like Intersand and different companies like that to bring high-paying jobs to the community. So in 2020, no staff requests. However, we do have a request to reclassify the economic development specialist to the business development specialist. That is Jill's position, and she will handle, start doing more events within the business retention and expansion program. So throughout the town, more B2B. An example of that, you've seen her do some of the ones with the business listening sessions. We're also now doing, we're trying out some other events this year, speed networking, which is really a business to business for Windsor businesses to connect and get to know each other. So we stop some of that leakage from going out into some of the other communities. So she'll be working on that. That would be an approximate $6,500 increase to her salary. And then I also requested that we outsource the economic development marketing material. We had, when Katie was here, she got me a lot of the templates that were already done. So I just really need someone to get them actually done. So complete the actual implementation of putting the information into those and getting those up and going, because we have so many more things that I want to share, and I'm piecemealing information as I go on the fly because I just don't have the time to get that done. So you see maintain that level in the contract services line item for that. We'll continue. Something that I do want to mention that Shane had a great idea and we kind of talked about, but you don't see it currently reflected in the budget, is you'll see tonight in the presentation we have an outstanding balance of about $150,000 coming out of the Economic Development Fund next year. I'm working with the Kana Hotel Group to see when they're going to get their certificate of occupancy this year. That is $54,000. I'm not sure they're going to make it this year. If that's the case, it'll put the fund over to $200,000 next year. So we had a thought process and wanted to run it by you guys and didn't make the assumption if you wanted to bump the ED fund up to $300,000 next year instead of the $200,000, since the majority of it is already still committed to previous projects that we've worked on.
But it's not gonna be spent in this year.
No, the only one I have outstanding that has a chance to get reimbursed is the Kana Hotel Group.
So the Kana Hotel is $54,000 that could come into this year. The other projects the board has approved that we haven't funded yet are the EarthX batteries, which was $8,000, Da Vinci signs at $40,000, Bobcat of the Rockies at nearly $80,000, and Intersand at $23,000. So all these things that have been approved this year will be paid out next year. But even if we do the Kona Hotel this year, that would still mean that next year we would have about $50,000 left for the entire year. So the question is, should we take this fund, since we know we've already encumbered $150,000 at least, should we take it up to $250,000, $300,000 something, so the board has more revenue to at least allocate? I mean, you would still have to say this is worthwhile expenditure. I mean, the board would obviously have to approve it still.
Right.
But otherwise, it's gonna make Stacy's job maybe easier next year.
Yeah.
Saying,
Well, I've got 2 projects coming in, maybe even by the end of this year too, so.
But could that always be done after the fact too? I mean, couldn't we leave it as is, and if she gets an important project that would come in that needs more, could that request come before the board to make that ask?
yeah,
I
absolutely.
mean, so it could happen on either side, we could do it now.
Yeah,
or
it's still
we
a
could-
transfer.
Or even
so
if we
it's-
do it now and it's not enough, because it's a really big fish, she may have to come back before anyway to say, hey, look what we got.
Right,
I would
well,
bring that
that's
up.
absolutely right, and then I think another fair point is if it's done in 2020, we're probably, I mean, who knows if we're gonna actually spend it in 2020, it may actually hit us in
Get delayed or
2021.
Yeah.
So it's really hard to know the timing of these.
Seems like if we're gonna budget properly though, if we know we're gonna likely spend it, it seems like we should put it in the budget for next year instead of doing this.
Yeah, if the opportunity doesn't arise, then we still wouldn't spend it.
We wouldn't spend
It's
it.
not a blank check, yeah.
But it's already been allocated and.
But I don't know that we know that it is gonna be spent, we're making that assumption because we have all these that are rolling over.
Well, we've approved
So-
it, so we have to assume it's gonna be spent. It's approved money.
How much does it impact your ability to recruit businesses if you know the money is there, or you have to guess that the next board, because we're a new board, will approve something?
That's a valid point. Well, I think it can always be transferred, and you guys would always be made aware of what the impact would be at every single meeting or executive session that we had on it. And then I always try to update that when the formal presentation goes to the public so that they can see what the fund balance is. But I didn't think about the switch over of elected officials. Hopefully they'll
Or even if
still
we
see
didn't
that.
switch, still
Yeah.
gambling that we, existing board even would vote to approve me. I don't want to do anything that hinders the ability your ability to recruit a steakhouse.
Well, and we would, again,
Or
to
Apple Store.
to the
Chief, did
mayor's
Chief
point-
talk to you?
Then to the mayor's point, I think staff would still work with businesses and still bring it to the board and say, hey, look, this is how many jobs will be created, we think this is a good deal. Until the board says, stop bringing this stuff, we don't have money, we would continue to do that. But it would be ultimately obviously up to the board.
I'm okay either way, either way.
Miracle Steakhouse, no meat.
Well, we can,
But the
I think we're gonna
rationale-
have to have another budget discussion, just the board, like we did previously too.
Yeah.
There's a lot of unanswered, I
We need to
think,
think
questions
about some
still.
stuff,
That's
right?
something maybe we can tackle when we put that on the calendar.
It sounds like the rationale for the fund, and I think, Miles, you mentioned it, was to sort of measure what in fact you're doing in the course of a given year. If you're starting and you're saying you got $200,000 a year, whether it's actually paid, but it's committed, I think that just is a way of tracking. And this year, we committed to X dollars, even though it's not funded yet. I mean, you stayed within your starting point. That shouldn't count against next year if it's in fact paid out in that year. You reset to 200, the next year you have 200, and you make your obligations created. If it turns out they don't come through, well, it's better. I mean, you end up with a credit balance. It feels wrong to you to say, ha, we approved it, but you didn't pay it till the next year, and it's gonna cut against your next year.
Right.
Do that.
Well, yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I think there should be a credit, I think like that, yeah.
Yeah.
But stay within that set budget, but then it doesn't dink you on it.
Yeah, there's been other situations or other municipalities have just given a specific amount every year and then it just rolls over. So then you have that fund to do with whatever you want. I think this board had chose not to
Right.
do it at that time, that every year we would just assess it to
Just
see
reset it.
what was needed to be. So technically, there's some years that we didn't even use 100 of it.
Right.
But that money just stayed in the general fund. We didn't do a transfer
Right,
over.
right.
No, but it's still
It's-
the year in which you create the obligation to pay it, I think, is where you really should follow it through. It shouldn't cut into your next year's allocation.
Right.
Okay.
So, under that logic, it'd really be, we would carry forward the 150,000 into 2020, and it would become 350.
350, that's what I thought you were
150 that was
Yeah, you have a new
already
team.
obligated, and $200,000 that was.
I mean, that's the
Yeah.
rationale.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Woo-hoo.
Okay, well, yay.
Okay, is that it?
Yep, so same stuff, we're still working on retail placemaking that'll carry over into 2020 and business park build out, so there really isn't too many changes.
Is that a great
Oops.
Western Industrial Park building?
I'm trying to actually find other parks to continue to build out because, we've got two parks that are almost full. Highlands Industrial has only a couple more lots and Falcon Point is already full, and those are two limited industrial parks. So I'm just starting to work with how do we make these others according to our land use comp plan? What is gonna investigate those and what is going to take to bring those, whether it's infrastructure, whether, who knows what it is, from a development. Is it an ownership, is it a single ownership, is it multiple? I mean, we've got Windsor Industrial Park across from East Point and Falcon Point that hasn't had any movement on it for quite a while. So I'd like to see kind of what's going on there and if we can actually get some better ideas for that particular corner. But no financial, just one of my goals to
Yeah.
continue to grow Windsor and make sure we have the places for people to land when they want to come here.
I have a question in general. I mean, I'm gonna use Stacy's example, but I think there's other departments that have that. When there's been a request for a reclassification and a particular position is gonna see a bump up in pay, that would be the full extent, then that party would not be eligible on top of that for merit pay? On top of that reclassification, or on top of that, is there that on top of it?
I guess it depends on the timing when we do the reclassification and when we do the merit, so.
Right, she would be eligible this year for merit because it's all this last year, but to get the reclassification next year is when it actually hits the budget in 2020. If she just got reclassified in October, I don't know that I would recommend another bump as well. I think, the way it was expressed to me is there's potential for her to still get her merit this year, for her work this year as well.
I mean, I know, I'm not just pointing out to this,
Yeah.
we have several other of these, and I think we have to consider that, because that means basically these folks are back to back almost, because end of year you get, or when does merit pay happen in January, and then
Yeah.
I would assume reclassification would start in January, and so there's gonna be a double whammy there, which I
Right,
think.
and Carl had asked, so I guess I don't know how you budgeted that in. That's a good question, Mayor, I'm just.
What I did was I took the department manager's salary recommendation, and that's what I used as the salary for 2020. So no, it wouldn't have built in any merit, I just took it as the starting salary for 2020,
Okay.
what they recommended.
Seems like it might be a case-by-case situation. If someone that was reclassified, and say it was a very incremental, small increase, but yet they're a high performer, they might, but someone else, if they are reclassified, they saw like a 10% increase. Of course, then, merit probably is not necessary, so it seems like there has to be some judgment.
I think that's valid,
call.
that's happened to me before, so.
For example, so the board knows, like last year when we did the salary adjustments, we did the merit first, and then we did the salary adjustments, so people who have the salary adjusted, basically that their 3% got built in, and then if they were still short, they got the rest. So we didn't do it the opposite, we
Right.
didn't do the salary adjustment and then the merit.
So nobody's penalized for a perceived promotion here?
Well, it's just more, I think, kind of to the mayor's point, we didn't double hit the general fund, we made it affordable, so if they were deemed to get the reclassification, then that merit was kind of already built into that. So it was just a way of keeping it, I think, within the fiscal constraints of the town.
Okay. Okay,
You want the mouse or the keyboard, you coming up?
Would you mind just bringing me either one?
How about the numbers? We tested the numbers.
You tested the mouse, it didn't work for me.
He's not used to sitting up on this side.
He wants to sit by the door.
Yeah.
Thanks.
I mean, God, after all these guys went this.
He has to be able to see our faces as he goes through his budget.
Where am I? What? Okay. Okay.
Good.
All right, yeah, so this is gonna go quick board, so, my budget is actually extremely simple. The staff development, there's, showing a little bit of a decrease in that. That's just because I found out after I was, put on the search support that they'll pay for one out-of-state, conference a year for me, so that'll save taxpayers a little money. For employee relations, we are requesting a slight increase in that. And that's just basically because we've got, we're adding a few more people, everything, the incremental cost of things is just going up a little bit. We've had a few more people getting engaged with Pride, we've had more people getting nominated, and we've also experienced more group nominations where it's not just one person, it's nominating 4 people in Public Works versus just one person. So we've just seen these little incremental increases there, so we're asking for a little increase in that. And I'm sorry, that's my entire budget. It's pretty straightforward. It doesn't, all the money comes out of this next one here. So a few things, one is.
Maybe Christie should drive the slideshow.
Yeah, so the board development, you'll see, a pretty big increase requested there. That's almost completely due to the NLC, conference, so we're gonna, try to go to NLC this next year. And that conference is just a little bit expensive, so and we budgeted for everybody to attend that. So I'm guessing if there's a couple people who can't, obviously we will spend less. Contract services, we're requesting to continue to have that in the budget. We have not done a broadband survey this year. We've continued our work with Allo. The latest update that I had is that Allo, after the town provided our information, most of the real data they needed was from Excel and from Poudre Valley REA. And just within the last couple of weeks, they've now had all of the data that they needed from both those companies in. So they're running their analysis, and we think maybe 4 to 6 weeks from now, they'll have that analysis done. So while we've been working with Allo, it seemed like, maybe a waste of money to go through and do a study while there was a possible private solution. So we haven't done that study. We have stayed engaged with Greeley. We do understand their survey questions. I think that there's still, a lot of what we presented last year remains. but for the fact we just think it was too early to do a survey this year. So, no question.
By the way, that NLC conference is March 8th through the 11th, so folks can start looking at your calendars to think if it's gonna work for you or not.
And that was in Philadelphia?
Washington DC.
The Cherry
No, it's in
Blossom.
Fayetteville.
No, we usually are a little too early.
Last time was a blizzard.
It just depends. We've never, the times, every time we've been like a week too early.
And then the citizen survey, actually, the contract services is going down a little bit with the request, just because the citizen survey is every other year. Outside agency funding, there's two jumps there. One is the 1.5% of property tax calculates to be $130,000. That's up from, I think, about 101 this year. So again, we know with those assessed valuations and all the growth in Windsor, that has gone up proportionally. And then we're also, that was the best place to put the regional bus service at $115,000. So that's why that's there, and that's.
I didn't see the merit increase for the board in there.
Yeah, for obvious reasons.
In fact, decrease in some cases.
Because I have a question. The property tax, I wonder, 8 years ago that made sense at 1.5%. I wonder if that still makes sense. I know if we don't spend it, it doesn't happen, but it just keeps going up for no reason other than property tax goes up.
Right. So that's a great question. Staff has talked about that, because one, the board never spends all that. You never come close. So there's.
Well, in past years, when we were first on the town board, we used to have a lot more request funding, and we would go through that entire budget, pretty much.
So the two things, one is, I think I'd like to get a little bit more structure in how we do the request. I want to talk to staff and meet at the start of the year and present it to the board, but I'd like to get us in more of an annual grant request budget. It's seems a little bit happenstance to me to just get random requests through the year, and especially when we have these ongoing groups that it's the same events every year. So I'd like to get that a little bit better organized, and not to say that the board couldn't have contingency money for kind of one-time, one-off things, but I think we could add some more structure. And then the second thing, we've talked about, I know like Mr. Bennett has brought up many times, maybe having a fund for the arts or something. I think that something like this may be an opportunity for the board to say, okay, this much we should put in for community donation requests, and maybe part of it goes to the arts or whatever it is important to the board. So I think you could still set it aside and do something for the community.
The Windsor Housing Authority could fit under there if we wanted to grant that.
That's absolutely right. Yeah, I'd say.
And on that point, is that something, if we're looking at waiving those fees, I guess we don't know when it will happen, is that something we can budget for?
So we're gonna need to do a resolution.
Okay.
For that, so they need a resolution from the board right now.
Okay.
I think we're kind of waiting for Ian to get back from his hunting trip, because I need to meet with him. I would point this out, I missed one meeting and you guys give away like $600,000. I'm gonna point that out.
We're just not collecting those.
Hey, you left Dean in charge, so.
I've already had a talk with him.
You missed a meeting.
So we're gonna do a resolution for that, and then, it should be, although I don't even know the timing, I read through the presentation, but I didn't know if their timing was gonna be next year, or if it's just they're gonna go after CHAPA funds next year.
Yeah.
We have
Yeah.
next year construction,
But
if
we
we
talked-
get it in 2021.
Because we have to reimburse some of those items.
Right, so again, I
That's
think
something we
if
can
they,
budget though.
if they get the CHAPA, funds that they're gonna go, we would actually budget in 2021.
Right.
I would like to have, not tonight obviously, but some conversation about that community fund. Because I think we got so many needs, and I would like to have more direction on how we do that, whether it be public art or maybe it's Wayfair signing or something, I don't know.
Yeah, that's
But
gonna
the
be
board
coming in too
could
when the
Look at
study
something
is
that really
done with the
benefits the whole
DDA.
community
Right.
with that
That could
money.
be
Right.
several $100,000.
It could be, yeah, so have some flexibility with it, but some guidelines on something that benefits the entire community.
Right.
It gives us some more of an ability to have an impact, I think.
Yeah,
Be creative.
and I think it should be something that's visible to the community too.
So I think we should put that on a future work session. But we also, this kind of wraps up the budget, but I think we still have some conversation, and I think we actually have to go back to the capital budget, because now we're a little bit over with some of things, so we have to have a little bit additional conversation. again, so I think we need to look at our calendar.
What are we over on?
Because the things that we deemed that we wanted to do that night in
Oh,
terms
with the
of,
parks?
it's higher than the constraint that we wanted to keep that budget within.
For Eastman
So,
Park
so
South.
for Eastman Park South, so we're gonna have to relook at that and see what items we may want to choose to cut if the board, I mean, because we had made a decision at that time that we were staying at that limit. And then we found out that some of those things that had been presented and we thought what the numbers were are not the numbers. So I think we have to revisit that.
All the engineering and all those things compared to the other line items, when we brought
Right.
all those up.
Right, and we haven't even had time really as a board to discuss some of these other things about the positions and things that have come before us. So I think we need some time to have that discussion as well. So I don't know, and we want to adopt this on November 25th or just have it presented on the 25th and then adopted in December?
I think the intent was to adopt it in November 25th, but if the
So-
board would rather not, I mean, it's.
So if that's the wishes, then we need, I mean, we need to probably find a meeting time. We have a pretty light, I mean, I don't know, it's a special meeting next week on November 4th, the land use update code. What, is there an action that we have to take with relationship to that? Is that why we're calling it a special meeting?
There's an
think-
executive session that Ian had, I think.
Yeah, I think it was an executive session, but I don't know that we still need to have it. We might have
Well,
with
it
staff.
might be something else now.
Okay,
Oh.
right.
Will that be, is that a long conversation, do you think, or?
I think the
Can we
land use
tie-
code will take a while.
Okay. So I don't know if there's another night everybody wants to look at, or I'm just trying to tie into nights that I know that are already on your schedule.
So what we talked about, like, the cost is higher than what we anticipated, they changed?
Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah, with the parks, we had, when we went through and pulled out the lines, I think it was
Yeah.
about 750, 800,000, something
Okay.
like that. And then we went back and we pulled in, because a lot of the other costs, that $4 million, was buried in, contingencies and engineering and other things like that. So when we portioned those out into those other lines, it went up to about $1.5 million.
yeah, and we had some other requests, just kind of in general, about how we're gonna handle some pay and in general from HR, so I think I've never heard full discussion from the board, like,
Right,
where
we talked about it.
so I think we need to have that discussion.
Is this board only?
This would be board and, our town
November
manager.
18th, water rate, I don't know how extensive that's gonna be. It's getting close to the 25th though, isn't it?
Yeah, well, we could,
We can approve that.
the water rate discussion is gonna be, we've had Stan Tech look at the rates again. We're gonna just go through that with the board, go through that model.
Right.
Did we approve the budget on the 9th of December? Just has to be
Yes.
before the end of the year.
Yeah, well, it has to be before December 15th. You have to set your mill levy by the 15th. So, yeah, we could do it December 9th. That's,
If we have to, okay.
mhm.
Are you thinking you could fit this in on the 18th then? Is that what or not?
I think that would probably be,
Do we want to do a little bit earlier meeting? Can everybody come and do a final, well, it may not be final if we don't come to a consensus, but a budget discussion either that starts on the 18th, like at 4:30 or 5,
Right.
which give us an hour, hour and a half, and then we would have the full time afterwards to have your water rate and stormwater. Does that work? Miles, how does
Yeah.
that work with you? I know sometimes you have
No, I'm good, I'm out on the 11th, but the 18th is good.
does that work with
You're out.
everybody? Just come
I'll go.
earlier on
Well,
the
they all-
18th?
Veterans Day.
Oh.
Veterans Day.
I'm surprised you wanna go that far out with it, I would think we could meet, how many more budgets do we have to hear, are we done?
We're done,
That's
this
it.
was it.
I'm trying to understand why we wanna kick it out 2.5, 3 weeks from now.
Well, only because I don't know what
Well,
other
I
times
mean,
we
other than
have.
trying to,
I don't know how extensive land use code is gonna be.
well, I'm talking about like her original request not to do it on a Monday night, like is there
Oh, I
another
see.
night that we
Oh.
can meet? That's what
I see what you're.
and I think it'd be easier for staff too, to be able to put the numbers back together so that we can, keep on track with the plan for the budget adoption.
That's 2 weeks away. I don't know if I just know sometimes it's hard to get additional meetings in place. If
Right.
folks have
Yeah,
a date that works for everybody,
the
that's
last
fine.
special meeting we had, it was,
It was
I think I said
fine.
6 or 7 dates, and I still couldn't lock in.
You only had 5
everybody.
of us there, I think.
So, Yeah, I mean,
Oh
again.
crap, we're scheduled to do advisory board interviews
On the
for the
18th?
teens on the
Yeah, we were gonna
18th.
come in early.
That's the only date
Can that be
Crystal
post-
had after,
Can that be postponed?
that we
Oh,
could, yeah, that we could
We need to
postpone
postpone stuff.
even
That'd
till
be kicked
December
off
if we
then.
have to. I think the budget discussion would preempt and is more
I think it's more
important.
important.
Yes, I do.
Because there's a time.
But the
for
question
it.
is, do you think it should be
They rotated.
sooner?
For, housing authority?
Should we try to do a survey to see if we can get together earlier than that?
Yeah. Pollinate.
I'm
Or
willing
does-
to look at that, but I would want to make, you know, I hate to have anybody excluded.
Or does somebody, I mean,
I'd say the 18th at the latest, but is there, because that's 3 weeks from tonight.
Miles, your schedule's usually one of the tighter ones.
Yeah.
Do you have another night earlier before the 18th that would work?
The 13th or 14th? Is that what you're talking about, like an off Monday?
Yeah, the 13th.
Yeah, the
Well,
13th, there's that hatch
The
there.
13th is the hack, yeah, for regional leadership group. And what else did you say, the 14th?
It's fine
I could do
with
the
me.
14th.
Yeah, I got a haircut scheduled, but I guess I could.
In the evening?
Take it early, Dave, we'll take care of it.
But again, I mean,
Quick, I think.
the 14th is 4 days before.
4 days, I think we just keep it to the 18th.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay,
So what time on the 18th?
what,
Well, if you guys can do the 4:30, we can go 4:30 to
Yep.
6, and then just start
Yeah.
the work session at
I
6.
think
Okay.
so. We
That
can make
sounds
a
like a
decision. We can give us an hour and a half. We can.
yeah, I think.
Force us to.
Right.
I know, I'll shut up.
Tick tock, tick tock.
Okay.
Yeah.
Who's all going to the who's going to the CSU game on Saturday? Isn't there some other folks?
Which game, volleyball?
No, the
No,
football game,
the
I had signed
football.
up for that. Dr. Jones, you.
We all got an invite, and I thought there were,
You had signed
I
up
thought
for
there were a
that
couple
too,
other
the
folks that
civic-
it looked like
civic
got
service
tickets,
day
but
at the
I don't
CSU
think they said
Football
who.
game?
What's the weather gonna
We
be?
had softball.
That's right.
It's a civic and service day, so just you and I guess.
Well, we
I'm
send
gonna
out
be
to
there.
every town employee, so.
Oh, so maybe some other folks from the town. are
Yeah,
coming.
there
Okay.
probably would be. I mean, I was planning on, I know you get to go down on the field. I was planning on just all two in the,
Just cheering.
rub elbows with you when you're in the hospitality.
Hitting second class.
Yeah, well, I thought I thought Windsor had a pretty good representation going. I saw some number, but I didn't know who it all was.
We sent a few emails out to town employees inviting them. So they're inviting all local government folks to do
I
that.
don't think,
If I do,
Yeah, they
I-
sent it out to everybody.
Yeah.
That was pretty a long time ago, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay,
3 months ago.
we better head upstairs, we got another meeting.
well, you do, it wasn't free tickets. It wasn't free tickets.
Girls
No,
have run, man.
but the town,